Have you ever wondered how it can completely transform someone's life? This is the story of Laura, a 9-year-old girl who, after enduring the heartbreak of losing her mother and surviving the cold streets, found hope most unexpectedly. One cold night, her life collided with a renowned lawyer when she found his wallet on the sidewalk. What happened next would forever change both their lives. From sadness to joy, from despair to hope, this story shows the power of kindness and the strength of the human spirit. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. 9-year-old Laura, her innocence preserved despite her harsh circumstances, found something she never expected: a wallet brimming with cash. It wasn't just any wallet, it belonged to a prominent and highly respected lawyer in the city. What happened next stunned everyone who heard the story, leaving an indelible mark on their hearts. It was on a somber, rainy morning that Laura's world began to unravel. She was just 7 years old, with raven black hair that clung to her face in the dampness, her small hand tightly grasping her mother Lucy's as they walked away from what had once been their home. The house, though small, had been filled with memories, warmth, and love. Now its door was locked, and their meager possessions, furniture worn by years of use, were heaped unceremoniously on the curb. The scene was one of heartbreak, a vivid symbol of a life that had slipped beyond their control. Lucy, once vibrant and full of life, now carried a look of profound exhaustion etched into her features. Deep lines carved across her face told the story of sleepless nights and endless worry. Her eyes, once bright with hope, now reflected a soul weighed down by the burden of knowing they had nowhere left to turn. The eviction had been the final blow, a brutal reality check that left Lucy and her daughter out on the streets, homeless and without a safety net. The world that had once seemed so full of possibilities now appeared cold and unforgiving. For years, Lucy had fought a desperate battle against the grip of alcoholism, a fight that drained her of energy and hope with each passing day. She did her best to put on a brave face for her daughter, but the toll of her inner demons was visible in every movement she made. That gray, dreary afternoon, they wandered through the bustling city streets, searching for some semblance of refuge in a world that had offered them none. Lucy's descent into alcoholism had begun after the sudden and devastating loss of Laura's father, a man whose memory was still cherished deeply by both mother and daughter. He had been a hard-working and kind-hearted individual, a pillar of strength in their lives, and his unexpected death from a heart attack shattered their world. The pain of his absence was unbearable for Lucy, and she turned to alcohol as a way to numb the relentless ache of grief. At first, it had been an occasional escape, but over time it became a vicious cycle that consumed her, pulling her further away from reality and from her daughter, who needed her more than ever. The early days of life on the streets were nothing short of a nightmare. Stripped of the safety and comfort of a home, Lucy and Laura found themselves lost in an unforgiving world where survival became their only focus. They wandered, moving from place to place, hoping to find a corner where they could rest their weary bodies. The cold night air bit at their skin, seeping into their bones as they huddled together for warmth. The constant noise of the city cars honking, people shouting, sirens wailing was a relentless reminder of their new reality. Every day was a struggle, and every night was a test of endurance. Yet, amidst the despair, young Laura somehow managed to find beauty in the smallest of things. She would spot a delicate flower blooming through the cracks in the sidewalk, or catch a glimpse of the stars peeking through the clouds. And sometimes the rarest gift of all would come her way: a warm smile from a stranger who crossed their path, a small but powerful reminder that kindness still existed in the world. On the streets, Lucy and Laura discovered an unexpected sense of community, a family of sorts among those who had also been cast aside by society. The people they met had their struggles, but they were bound by a shared understanding of survival and a deep sense of empathy for one another. It was in this tight-knit community that they found a source of strength and hope, Among the many faces on the streets, Mrs. Molly stood out. She was an elderly woman with gray hair that had long since lost its color, her frail body bent from years of hardship. Despite her difficult circumstances, she had lived on the streets for as long as anyone could remember, and in that time she had become a motherly figure to many who crossed her path. Mrs. Molly took a special liking to Laura, seeing in her the spark of resilience that was so rare in such a young child. She became a surrogate grandmother to Laura, teaching her the unwritten rules of life on the streets, lessons about survival, but also about kindness, generosity, and the importance of staying true to oneself. Mrs. Molly often spoke about honesty and solidarity, values that held their fragile community together. Out here, she would say with a gentle but firm voice, "We may not have much, but we have each other. And that's what makes us strong." She believed that even in the face of adversity, maintaining one's integrity and compassion was what truly mattered. Lucy's battle to stay sober became a losing fight as the relentless temptations of alcohol surrounded her daily. The streets were filled with triggers, cheap liquor stores, half-empty bottles left behind, and the overwhelming despair that made each sip feel like an escape. Despite her efforts, Lucy couldn't find her way back to sobriety. Her health, which had already begun to decline, worsened rapidly. The once vibrant woman with flushed cheeks and an infectious smile had faded into a pale, gaunt shadow of herself. Her face, now thin and sunken, carried the deep marks of regret and anguish. Her eyes, which used to be filled with hope and love for Laura, reflected only the torment she couldn't escape from. Then came one particularly bitter, bone-chilling night. Lucy, worn down by her years of struggling, finally succumbed to the illness that had been steadily consuming her. The years of alcohol abuse had ravaged her liver beyond repair, and without any access to the medical care she so desperately needed, she simply couldn't survive. Laura, who had watched her mother fight with every ounce of her strength, held Lucy's cold, frail hand as she took her final breath. Silent tears rolled down Laura's dirt-streaked face, her heart breaking as she sat beside her mother's lifeless body. The sense of loss was overwhelming, a weight far too heavy for a young girl to bear. At that moment, Laura felt more alone than ever before. Her mother had been her anchor, and now, with her gone, the future seemed terrifyingly uncertain. The small community of street dwellers who had embraced Lucy and Laura in their darkest moments came together to help in the aftermath. Mrs. Molly, George, and a few others gathered whatever they could to give Lucy a simple burial. They found a quiet spot, and with no money for a proper gravestone, they marked her resting place with a plain stone. As Laura stood over her mother's grave, the cold wind whipping around her, she made a promise to herself, a vow to carry on Lucy's legacy. Despite her mother's struggles, Lucy had always instilled in Laura the values of honesty, courage, and resilience. Laura promised to hold on to those lessons, to honor both her mother and the friends she had made in the harsh world of the streets. She vowed that no matter how difficult life became, she would survive. From that moment on, she began the painful process of rebuilding her life, starting from the ground up. Life on the streets was unrelenting, and each day seemed to present new challenges. Yet Laura refused to surrender to despair. She was determined to find strength within herself, the same strength her mother had always admired in her. Laura moved forward with an unyielding resolve, carrying in her heart the memory of Lucy and the dream of one day finding a place she could call home. The first few days after her mother's death were the most excruciating. The weight of grief hung heavy on Laura's small shoulders, and the world seemed even more hostile without Lucy by her side. But Laura, now an 8-year-old girl, knew she had to find a resilience she never thought possible. On that first night without her mother, Laura found a small bit of refuge beneath the awning of a closed shop. The icy wind cut through her tattered clothes, and she curled up tightly, trying desperately to keep warm. Her stomach growled loudly from hunger, But Laura gritted her teeth and reminded herself of the strength her mother had always encouraged. Though the world seemed cruel, she found solace in the memories of happier times with Lucy, those fleeting moments of laughter and love that no hardship could ever take away. Clutching those memories, Laura resolved to survive, no matter what. Over time, Laura began to explore the streets, slowly getting to know the world around her. She discovered that she wasn't entirely alone in her suffering. There were others, people just like her and Lucy, who had lost everything and found themselves adrift in a society that seemed to have forgotten them. Among these new faces, one person stood out: George, a middle-aged man with warm, kind eyes and a gentle smile. George had lived on the streets for years, and when he noticed Laura all alone, his heart went out to her. He took her under his wing, becoming a guide and protector. George taught her the hard truths of surviving in such a harsh environment. He showed her where to scavenge for discarded food that was still safe to eat, which alleys to avoid when night fell, and the best spots to take shelter when the weather turned cold. Through him, Laura met others in the community, including Mrs. Molly, who had become a pillar of strength and compassion for those who found themselves on the streets. As Mrs. Molly was more than just a fellow street dweller. She became a grandmother figure to Laura, filling the void left by Lucy's passing. Her hair, gray and unruly, framed a face lined with years of hardship, yet her spirit remained unbroken. Despite the daily challenges she faced, Mrs. Molly never lost her sense of generosity. She had an uncanny ability to care for those around her, often sharing what little she had with others who were struggling. For Laura, Mrs. Molly became a source of wisdom and comfort, someone she could turn to in moments of doubt. Molly's words, spoken with quiet conviction, echoed in Laura's mind. Life on the street is tough, my dear, but it's still life. And as long as we're here, we need each other to survive. Those words became Laura's mantra, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, she was not alone, and that with the help of her newfound family on the streets, she could continue to move forward, one step at a time. Over time, Laura began to cultivate a mindset of unwavering resilience and fierce determination. Life on the streets had taught her not to be consumed by adversity, but to tackle it head-on with creativity and ingenuity. When the bitter cold gripped the city, Laura called upon the teachings of George and Mrs. Molly. She would seek out safer shelters, hidden away from the biting wind, and gather discarded materials to craft makeshift fires that could offer her a bit of warmth. Every challenge she faced became a lesson, each one molding her into a survivor with an iron will. Despite the harshness of her situation, Laura managed to find moments of unexpected joy. The bonds she formed with her fellow homeless companions became a source of comfort and happiness. Around the crackling warmth of a fire, they would share laughter and stories, tales of their past lives, dreams of what could have been, and even their hopes for the future. It was in these moments that Laura realized the streets, for all their dangers and uncertainties, had given her an unlikely but loving family. They might not have had much, but they had each other, and that sense of community gave Laura the strength she needed to carry on. Laura also began to cherish the little victories, the small achievements that might seem insignificant to others but were monumental to her. A hot meal found after a long day, a sturdy blanket that would keep her warm during the cold nights, these became treasures in her world of scarcity. Life on the streets was indeed a constant battle, but Laura refused to let it break her spirit. Every obstacle she overcame, every hardship she endured, only fueled her determination to keep going. She held tightly to the promise she had made to herself and her mother that one day she would leave this life behind and find a place where she could truly belong, a place she could call home. Though she knew the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, Laura was resolute in her decision to fight for a better future. The resilience she had developed, combined with the support of her new street family, gave her the courage to continue. Day by day, step by step, she faced the difficulties of her reality with a heart full of hope. She never forgot the lessons her mother had taught her: honesty, kindness, and the strength to carry on, no matter what. Those values became her guiding light in a world that often seemed dark and unforgiving. One cold, starry night, the kind of night when the wind cut through the air like icy blades, Laura found herself once again seeking shelter beneath the awning of a closed shop. Now 9 years old, she wrapped herself tightly in a thin blanket she had managed to acquire the day before. It wasn't much, but it provided some warmth against the biting cold. Laura's sharp eyes scanned the streets, always on high alert for any sign of danger or opportunity. She had learned to stay vigilant, as life on the streets could change in an instant. That night, something caught her attention. A sleek, black luxury car came to a stop in front of one of the city's most renowned restaurants. The establishment was known for its opulence, a place where the elite gathered to enjoy fine dining and expensive wines. Laura knew of this restaurant. Its glamorous reputation was far removed from her reality, yet she had often watched the people who frequented it, marveling at how different their lives were from hers. They lived in a world of wealth and privilege, a world that seemed untouchable to someone like Laura. Her curiosity piqued, and she watched as an elegant man stepped out of the car. He was tall and distinguished, his gray hair neatly combed, and his presence commanded attention. Dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, he moved with the air of someone who had known success for a long time. Laura observed him closely as he made his way toward the restaurant's entrance. But then, something unexpected happened. Just as he exited the car, his wallet slipped from his pocket and landed on the curb, unnoticed by the man himself. He continued walking into the restaurant, oblivious to his loss. Laura's heart raced. She stared at the wallet, her mind spinning with thoughts. It was a small, unassuming object, yet it represented so much money, identification, a glimpse into the life of someone who seemed to have everything. For a brief moment, she hesitated. In her world, such a find could mean survival. But then, the lessons her mother had taught her, reinforced by the wisdom of Mrs. Molly and George, came rushing back. Honesty was a virtue, no matter the circumstances. The right thing to do was clear. With a deep breath, Laura sprang into action. She darted over to the curb, her small hands quickly picking up the wallet. She clutched it tightly, feeling the weight of the decision she had made. She could have taken the money and run, but she chose a different path, one guided by the values instilled in her by those she had loved and lost. Laura stood by, waiting patiently, knowing that the man would eventually realize his wallet was missing and come back to look for it. Though she had nothing to call her own, Laura was rich in spirit. She had learned that even in the darkest of times, doing the right thing mattered. And so on that cold, starry night, she stood ready to return what wasn't hers, her heart filled with a quiet strength that no hardship could ever take away from her. It didn't take long for Albert Morgan, the renowned lawyer known for his sharp mind and unwavering confidence, to notice something was wrong. As he sat down at his table, ready to enjoy an elegant evening, his hand instinctively reached for his wallet only to find it missing. Panic surged through him, his heart pounding as his mind raced through the possibilities. Where could it be? He quickly excused himself from the table and rushed outside, his eyes darting anxiously across the sidewalk, scanning the ground for any sign of it. That's when he spotted her, a small, frail girl standing near the curb, clutching something in her hands. His breath caught in his throat as he realized it was his wallet. Relief washed over him in an overwhelming wave, and he hurried toward her, his once panicked expression softening. "Sir, I think this is yours," the young girl said, her voice quiet but steady as she extended the wallet toward him. Albert came to an abrupt stop, taken aback by the girl's honesty. He had expected the worst: a lost wallet, stolen money, but here she was, offering it back to him with a sincerity that touched him deeply. He took the wallet gratefully, and a warm smile spread across his face. a mix of gratitude and admiration in his eyes. "Thank you very much, little girl. You've saved my day," he said, his voice full of genuine appreciation. As he looked more closely at her, he noticed the worn state of her clothes, the dirt smudged on her face, and the tiredness in her eyes. His heart ached with sympathy. "What's your name?" "Laura," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper as she looked up at him shyly. Albert knelt to meet her gaze, his warm eyes filled with kindness. "Laura, I'd like to thank you properly for what you've done. How about you join me for dinner at the restaurant?" Laura hesitated. She had never stepped foot inside a place like that before. The restaurant was far from her reality, a world of polished silverware, fine dining, and people dressed in expensive clothes. The thought of entering made her nervous, and she glanced down at her worn shoes, unsure if she belonged. But something was comforting in Albert's eyes, a kindness that made her feel safe. And her empty stomach growled at the mention of food, reminding her just how hungry she was. "All right," she finally agreed, her voice small but filled with quiet determination. Albert's smile widened, and he gently guided her toward the restaurant. As they stepped through the doors, Laura's eyes widened in awe. The place was breathtaking. Shiny chandeliers sparkled from the ceiling, casting a warm, golden light over the room. The tables were draped in pristine white cloths, and soft music filled the air, creating an atmosphere of elegance and serenity. It was a world completely unlike her own. The security guard at the entrance raised an eyebrow when he saw Laura, his gaze shifting between her and Albert. But one look at the renowned lawyer was enough to keep him silent. He stepped aside, allowing them both to pass without a word. They were seated at a table near the window, where the view of the city lights sparkled like distant stars. A waiter quickly approached, his manner professional and courteous, though his eyes briefly flickered with curiosity when he saw Laura. She felt a bit out of place, the luxurious surroundings overwhelming her, and she shifted nervously in her seat. When the waiter handed them the menu, Laura hesitated, unsure of what to order. The names of the dishes sounded foreign, and the descriptions seemed too fancy for her to understand. She glanced up at Albert, her uncertainty clear. Sensing her hesitation, Albert smiled reassuringly and took the menu from her hands. "How about I order for both of us?" he suggested kindly. Laura nodded, grateful for the gesture. As they waited for their meal, Albert couldn't help but observe the young girl sitting across from him. There was something remarkable about her, a quiet strength that seemed far beyond her years. What had she been through to end up here, on the streets, yet still retain such bravery and integrity? As the waiter returned with their food, Laura's eyes widened in amazement. The dishes were beautifully presented, steaming with delicious aromas that made her stomach rumble even louder. The warmth of the restaurant embraced her, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. For the first time in a long while, Laura felt a sense of safety, a fleeting but comforting moment of peace. The fire crackling in the distance, the soft hum of conversation, and the glow of the chandeliers all made her feel like she had stepped into another world, a world she had only ever seen from afar. As they began to eat, Laura couldn't help but savor every bite. The food was unlike anything she had ever tasted, rich, flavorful, and filling. But more than the meal, it was the kindness of this stranger that warmed her heart. She had expected nothing when she returned the wallet, and yet here she was, sitting in a luxurious restaurant, sharing a meal with someone who had shown her kindness without asking for anything in return. For Albert, the evening was just as eye-opening. He found himself captivated by this young girl's story. Though she had said little, her presence spoke volumes. He realized that behind her small, fragile exterior was a spirit of resilience and determination that life on the streets had forged in her. It was a humbling reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, there could be moments of hope, bravery, and human connection. "Let's order something delicious, Laura. I'm sure you'll like it," Albert said, his smile warm and encouraging. Laura nodded, feeling a bit more at ease in his presence. There was something about his kindness that made her feel safe, even in this unfamiliar world of luxury and comfort. Her stomach growled with anticipation, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to forget the cold, harsh reality waiting for her outside the restaurant's doors. Here, in this place of warmth and elegance, she felt almost like a normal child again. And so, in that luxurious restaurant, a night began that would forever change Laura's life. The welcoming atmosphere enveloped her like a soft blanket, a stark contrast to the biting chill of the streets she had come to know so well. The soft glow of the chandeliers, the soothing hum of gentle music, and the murmur of conversations around her all combined to create an almost magical environment. Laura couldn't help but look around, her wide eyes filled with fascination as she took in every detail. It was a world so different from the one she had been living in, a world of warmth, light, and safety. Sitting at the table with Albert, she felt as though she had stepped into a dream, one she didn't want to wake up from. While they waited for their food, Albert tried to engage Laura in conversation. He asked her simple questions about her interests and her favorite things, but he quickly noticed that she was anxious, her responses hesitant and brief. Recognizing her discomfort, Albert decided not to push. Instead, he offered her a reassuring smile and allowed her the space to relax at her own pace. He knew that trust took time, and he was willing to be patient. When the food finally arrived, the rich aromas wafted across the table, and Laura couldn't help but stare in amazement at the plates set before her. The dishes were unlike anything she had ever seen, so colorful, so beautifully arranged. Her stomach growled louder, and she suddenly felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. "You can eat as much as you want," Laura Albert said gently, his voice filled with warmth. "Don't worry about anything. Tonight you can just enjoy." Laura started eating slowly at first, savoring each bite as though it might be her last. But as the hunger that had gnawed at her for days resurfaced, she couldn't hold back. She devoured the food with enthusiasm, unable to remember the last time she had felt so full. Albert watched her with a mix of tenderness and concern. He couldn't imagine the hardships this young girl had faced, and he found himself wanting to understand her story, to know how he could help. After a few moments of quiet, Laura paused, her fork resting on her plate. She looked up, meeting Albert's kind gaze. Something about his gentle eyes, the way he listened without judgment, made her feel safe enough to speak. Slowly, with hesitation at first, she began to tell her story. Her words were soft and hesitant, but soon they began to flow with an honesty that was both heartbreaking and raw. Laura spoke about her father's sudden death and the spiral of grief that had consumed her mother. She described how her mother had turned to alcohol as a way to cope, how they had been evicted from their home, and how they had ended up on the streets. She shared the painful memories of her mother's final days and the loneliness that had settled in after she passed away. The streets had become her new reality, a place of danger and uncertainty, but Laura had somehow found the strength to survive. Albert listened intently, never interrupting, his heart aching with each word she spoke. He could see the depth of pain in her eyes, but also the incredible resilience that had kept her going. This little girl had endured more than most adults ever would, yet here she was, still standing, still hopeful. When she finished her story, Albert took a moment to gather his thoughts and moved beyond words. "Laura," he said softly, his voice full of admiration, "you are an incredibly brave girl. I can't imagine how hard it has been for you." Laura nodded quietly, still feeling a bit shy, but also relieved to have shared her story. Albert's gaze softened further. "I want to help you," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "You can't keep living on the streets, Laura. It's not safe, and you deserve so much more than that. How about you come to my house tonight? You can take a hot bath, have a good meal, and sleep in a comfortable bed. What do you think?" Laura hesitated. The offer seemed too good to be true, and the fear of being let down once again made her wary. But there was something in Albert's eyes and honesty, a sincerity that made her believe he truly wanted to help. After a moment of uncertainty, she gave a small nod. "All right," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper. Albert's face lit up with relief and joy. "Great. Let's finish eating, and then we'll head home. I'm sure you'll like it." After they finished their meal, Albert and Laura left the restaurant together, stepping out into the cool night air. Laura's heart beat fast as they made their way to Albert's car, a mix of excitement and nervousness swirling inside her. As they drove through the city streets, she stared out the window, watching the world pass by in a blur of lights and shadows. She couldn't quite believe what was happening, that someone had shown her such kindness, that she was being given a chance to escape the streets, if only for a night. When they finally arrived at Albert's house, Laura's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just a house, it was a home. Cozy, warm, and beautifully kept, it exuded a sense of peace and security that Laura had almost forgotten existed. Albert led her inside, showing her the bathroom and handing her a set of clean, warm clothes. She held them close, feeling the softness of the fabric, and couldn't help but smile. In the bathroom, Laura took a long, hot bath. The warmth of the water enveloped her, washing away not just the dirt and grime of the streets, but also some of the heavy burden she had been carrying for so long. As she scrubbed her skin clean, she felt lighter, as though she was shedding not just the physical dirt, but also the weight of her worries, if only for a moment. After her bath, Laura put on the soft, comfortable clothes Albert had provided, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she experienced a sense of relief. It was a strange but comforting feeling, like rediscovering something she had long forgotten. Albert prepared a steaming cup of hot tea for her and led her to a cozy room. The room felt like a sanctuary, a haven from the harsh world she had grown so accustomed to. The bed, with its soft mattress and warm blankets, seemed like a true luxury, something Laura had only dreamed of. As she settled into the comfort of the bed, a wave of exhaustion hit her, but it was accompanied by an unexpected sense of peace. Albert stood at the doorway, watching as she nestled into the blankets. He smiled warmly. "Good night, Laura. Sleep well," he said softly before turning off the light and gently closing the door behind him. Lying in the darkness, Laura found herself reflecting on the whirlwind of events that had brought her here. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe, truly safe. The warmth of the bed, the silence of the room, and the kindness she had been shown gave her a glimmer of hope she hadn't felt in years. As sleep began to take hold of her, Laura allowed herself to dream of the possibility of a new beginning, a future that was different from the streets. And with that hope, she fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, her dreams filled with images of brighter days ahead. When the first rays of sunlight began to stream through the curtains of the cozy room, Laura slowly opened her eyes. For a brief moment, she forgot where she was. The softness of the mattress beneath her, the warmth of the blankets wrapped around her, and the comforting silence were all so different from the cold, noisy streets she had grown used to. But then, as the memories of the previous night came rushing back, a small smile spread across her face. She was at Albert's house, the kind man who had treated her with compassion she hadn't known in far too long. Getting out of bed felt like stepping out of a dream. As she looked around the room, she noticed a neat pile of clean clothes folded on a chair next to the bed. She quickly dressed and made her way downstairs, drawn by the irresistible smell of fresh coffee and toast wafting through the air. When she entered the kitchen, she found Albert already busy preparing breakfast, his expression as welcoming as ever. "Good morning, Laura." "Did you sleep well?" he asked, his voice full of warmth. "I did." "Thank you," she replied, still a bit shy but filled with gratitude. They sat down at the table, and shared a simple but delicious breakfast. The food was nourishing, but it was the warmth of the conversation that truly put Laura at ease. Albert made an effort to engage her, asking her about her favorite foods and telling light-hearted stories about his work as a lawyer. As he spoke, Laura found herself relaxing, her initial shyness slowly fading as she became more comfortable in this new and unfamiliar routine. In the days that followed, Laura began to adjust to life in Albert's house. She found solace in the routine, a sense of stability she had been missing for so long. She eagerly helped with household chores, quickly picking up how to clean, cook, and organize. It gave her a sense of purpose and belonging, and she took pride in contributing to the upkeep of the home. Albert, in turn, did everything he could to provide a safe and nurturing environment for her. He bought her new clothes that fit properly, books that she could get lost in, and even a few toys that sparked her imagination. He wanted to create a sense of normalcy for her, something she had been deprived of for far too long. As Laura grew more comfortable, she also became more curious about Albert's life. She learned that he was a respected lawyer, known for his dedication, integrity, and fierce sense of justice. He had built a successful career, but despite all his professional accomplishments, he had never married and lived alone in his spacious house. One quiet afternoon, as they sat together in the living room, Albert decided to open up to Laura about a more personal part of his life. He leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know, Laura," he began, his voice soft and reflective, "I've spent a lot of my life focused on my work. I've always believed in fighting for what's right and helping people who can't help themselves. But along the way, I think I lost sight of something important: family, connection. The simple things that make life meaningful." Laura listened intently, sensing the sincerity in his words. "I've always been so focused on helping others through my work," Albert continued, "but I didn't realize how much I was missing in my personal life. I never had children of my own and never found the right time to settle down. And now, looking back, I realize that while I've helped a lot of people, I've also been lonely." He paused, glancing at Laura with a gentle smile. "But meeting you, Laura, it's reminded me of what's truly important. It's given me a chance to do something that goes beyond just work. I want to help you find the life you deserve. I want to be there for you, not just for a moment, but for as long as you need." Laura's heart swelled with emotion. She had spent so long feeling alone, adrift in a world that seemed to have no place for her. But here was Albert, offering her not just a roof over her head, but something far more valuable: care, support, and the chance for a better future. Tears welled up in her eyes. But this time, they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude and hope, emotions she hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Albert smiled, a warmth radiating from him. "You don't have to thank me, Laura. You've shown more bravery and strength than most people ever do in their lives. You deserve every bit of kindness the world has to offer." And with those words, a new chapter began in Laura's life. It wouldn't be easy, there were still challenges ahead, and the road to healing would take time. But for the first time in a long time, Laura felt that she wasn't walking that road alone. Albert was there by her side, ready to help her rebuild her life, one step at a time. And with that support, Laura knew that one day she would find the home she had always dreamed of, a place where she could truly belong. "Laura, I never married and don't have children," Albert began, his voice tinged with a thoughtful sadness. He looked away for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts, before continuing. "A few years ago, I found out I'm sterile. I can't have biological children. At first, it was difficult to accept. I had always imagined having a family of my own, but when that possibility was taken from me, I threw myself into my work. Over time, I learned to live with it. But there was always this emptiness." Laura listened attentively, her heart softening toward Albert. For someone who seemed to have everything: a successful career, a beautiful home, respect from those around him, it was a revelation to see that he, too, had faced struggles and deep personal challenges. She realized that even though their lives were so different, they both carried a burden of loss. In the weeks that followed, Laura's presence began to change something in Albert. He found himself becoming more attached to her, captivated by her courage and resilience. Every time he saw her smile or witnessed her determination to adapt to her new surroundings, it stirred something within him. He admired the way she faced each day, despite all she had been through. Gradually, an idea began to take shape in his mind, the idea of adopting her. It wasn't a thought he had considered lightly, it was an idea that grew with each passing day, fueled by his deepening affection for her. But with it came hesitation. Adoption was a monumental decision, and Albert questioned whether he was truly ready to take on the responsibility of being a father. Albert sought the advice of his friends and colleagues, many of whom were parents themselves. He told them about Laura, about the connection he felt with her, and the possibility of adopting her. The responses were overwhelmingly positive. They encouraged him, pointing out how much both he and Laura could gain from this new family relationship. They emphasized that he had already begun to offer her what she needed most: stability, care, and a sense of belonging. Still, doubts lingered in Albert's mind. He didn't want to make a decision based solely on emotion. He wanted to be sure that he could offer Laura the kind of love and support she needed, the kind she deserved. While Albert wrestled with his thoughts, Laura continued to flourish in her new environment. She excelled in her tasks around the house, showing a willingness to learn and a curiosity about the world that touched Albert deeply. As the days turned into weeks, the haunted look that had once clouded her face began to fade. In its place, a glimmer of hope began to shine through something that had been absent for far too long during her time on the streets. Albert noticed the change in her, and it filled him with a quiet sense of pride. He could see that she was beginning to heal, slowly but surely. The bond between Albert and Laura grew stronger with each passing day. Every small moment, whether it was sharing a meal, laughing at a joke, or simply spending quiet time together, strengthened the connection they had formed. Albert could feel it deep in his heart. Laura was becoming a part of him. She had found a place in his life that he hadn't even realized was empty until she filled it. And with every smile she gave him, every gesture of affection, Albert felt more inclined to turn this temporary arrangement into something permanent. He knew that the decision to adopt Laura had to be made with care and thoughtfulness, but deep down, he already felt as though she was a part of his family. One evening, Albert sat alone in his office, the soft light of the desk lamp casting gentle shadows on the walls. In his hands, he held a document, a detailed guide on the adoption process that he had requested after weeks of research. He had spent countless hours consulting with friends, reading about adoption, and reflecting on what it would mean to take this step. Now, with all the information before him, the time had come to make a decision. He leaned back in his chair, his mind racing with thoughts. The pros and cons seemed to battle for dominance in his head. On one hand, he saw the opportunity to give Laura a life she had never known: a stable, loving home where she could grow and thrive. He could offer her education, security, and most importantly, a family. But on the other hand, his doubts resurfaced. He had never been a father before. Could he do this? Could he give her everything she needed? What if he wasn't good enough? What if he failed her? Albert sighed, rubbing his temples as he stared down at the document. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on him. But then, he thought of Laura, her smile, her laughter, the light that had returned to her eyes since she had come into his home. He remembered the first night she had spent in his house, the way she had looked at him with trust, despite everything she had been through. And in that moment, he knew that he couldn't turn away from her. He couldn't let his fears stop him from giving her the life she deserved. With a deep breath, Albert made his decision. He reached for a pen and began to fill out the necessary forms, his heart pounding with a mix of nervousness and excitement. He wasn't just taking a step toward adopting Laura, he was opening a new chapter in both of their lives. It wouldn't be easy, he knew that there would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and uncertainty. But for the first time in years, Albert felt a sense of purpose that went beyond his work. He was ready to become the father that Laura needed, and to create the family that neither of them had ever had. As he signed the final document, Albert looked out the window, watching the night sky stretch endlessly above. In that quiet moment, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. Whatever the future held, he knew that he and Laura would face it together, as a family. And that thought, more than anything, gave him hope. As Albert sat in his office, his thoughts drifted back to the moments he had shared with Laura over the past few weeks. He remembered the spark of joy in her eyes when she learned something new, how her smile would light up the room when they talked about her dreams. Her presence had brought a sense of purpose into his life that he hadn't felt in years, filling a void he had long tried to ignore. Yet, despite the joy Laura brought, fear continued to gnaw at him. What if he couldn't meet her emotional needs? What if, despite all his good intentions, he couldn't provide the love and stability she deserved? At the same time, Laura sat in her room, overwhelmed by her whirlwind of emotions. Albert's house was beginning to feel like home, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of belonging. The routines they had developed, the warm dinners, the shared laughter, and the quiet moments of learning and conversation all made her feel like she was part of a family again. But alongside that comfort was an ever-present shadow of fear. What if this was all temporary? What if, one day, she was sent back to the streets, back to the life of uncertainty she had fought so hard to survive? Each time Albert left for work or attended a meeting, Laura couldn't help but worry. Was he thinking about sending her away? Were his doubts stronger than the affection he seemed to show her? These thoughts consumed her, making it difficult to focus on anything else. Albert wasn't blind to Laura's worries. He could see the insecurity in her eyes, the same uncertainty he felt within himself. It was time to address the fears they both held. He needed to be honest with her, to share his thoughts and hopes. Perhaps together they could find a way forward that brought them both peace. That night, after dinner, Albert gently called Laura to join him in the living room. She sat down next to him, her heart pounding with anticipation. She could sense that something important was about to be discussed. Laura, Albert began, his voice soft but steady. I've been thinking a lot about us in the future. I know this situation must be confusing and scary for you, but I want you to know that you are very important to me. Laura looked up at him, her eyes filled with both hope and fear. His words were reassuring, but the uncertainty still lingered. I like being here with you, Albert, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But I'm scared that I'll have to go back to the streets. I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you. Albert's heart ached at her words. He reached out and gently took her hands in his, holding them with a tenderness that he hoped would convey just how much she meant to him. I understand your fear, Laura, he said softly. And I want you to know that I've been thinking about this a lot. I care about you deeply, and I don't want you to feel uncertain or scared about your future. I've been considering something important. I want to make sure that you always have a place where you feel safe, where you belong. Laura's eyes widened, a flicker of hope sparking within her. What do you mean, she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Albert took a deep breath, his resolve strengthening. I've been thinking about adopting you, Laura. I know it's a big decision, but I believe it's the right one. I want to give you a permanent home, a place where you never have to worry about going back to the streets. I want to be there for you, not just for now, but for the long term. tears welled up in Laura's eyes, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. She had longed for stability, for a home, for someone who cared about her, and now Albert was offering her all of that. The fear that had gripped her heart began to loosen its hold, replaced by a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "Really?" she whispered, barely able to believe the words she was hearing. "Really," Albert replied, his voice full of sincerity. "But I want to be honest with you too. I'm new to this, I've never been a father before, and I know I'm going to make mistakes along the way. But I'm committed to learning, and I'm committed to you. We can do this together if that's what you want." Laura nodded, a small smile breaking through her tears. "I want that, Albert. I want to stay here. With you." Albert squeezed her hands gently, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. This was the right decision, he knew it deep in his heart. And as they sat there together, both feeling the weight of the future lift just a little, they knew that they had found something special in each other. The following days were filled with preparation. Albert began the process of filing the necessary paperwork to start the adoption. He consulted with lawyers, filled out forms, and made sure every detail was in order. Laura, for her part, found a new sense of hope. She no longer felt like a temporary guest in Albert's house. She felt like she was truly home. The bond between them grew stronger, and with each passing day, they became more of a family. As the adoption process moved forward, both Albert and Laura faced challenges, but they faced them together. The road ahead wasn't easy, but with each step, they grew more certain that they were meant to walk it side by side. And in the end, that certainty was all they needed to build a future filled with love, hope, and the promise of a new beginning. On the morning of their first meeting with the social worker, Laura was filled with a mixture of nerves and excitement. Dressed in the new clothes Albert had bought her, she looked like any other ordinary girl, but her eyes carried the depth of someone who had seen and endured far too much for her age. For her experiences on the streets, the pain of losing her mother, and the harsh realities she had faced were all still etched in her memory. But today was different. Today was a step toward something new, something hopeful. As they waited in the reception area of the social services office, Albert noticed Laura's nervousness. He leaned down and offered her a reassuring smile. "It will be all right, Laura," he said gently. "Just be yourself. They just want to get to know you better." Laura nodded, trying to return his smile, though anxiety still tugged at her. When the social worker, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, called them in, Laura instinctively reached for Albert's hand, squeezing it tightly for comfort. He squeezed back, giving her the strength to face what lay ahead. The first interviews were challenging for both of them. Laura had to recount painful parts of her past, reliving the difficult memories of her life on the streets and the loss of her mother. The questions were tough, and there were moments when her voice faltered, but Laura's honesty and resilience shone through in every answer. She spoke about the values her mother had instilled in her, the importance of honesty, kindness, and solidarity, and how, despite the hardships, those values had guided her. She also shared how Albert had helped her find new hope, offering her a chance at a life she never thought she'd have. The social worker listened intently, clearly impressed by Laura's maturity and Albert's dedication to her well-being. They moved through several stages of the process, from home visits to psychological evaluations to more in-depth interviews with both Albert and Laura. Each stage brought them closer together, reinforcing the bond they had already begun to build. During one of the home visits, the social worker observed their interactions. She saw how Albert paid close attention to Laura's needs, always making sure she felt comfortable and supported. He was patient and kind, never pushing her beyond what she was ready to share. Laura, in turn, showed deep affection and respect for Albert. It was clear that the connection between them was genuine and strong. "It's evident that you two have a very special bond," the social worker remarked during one of the evaluations. That bond is crucial for the adoption process." Albert smiled, a wave of relief washing over him as he glanced at Laura. She looked back at him, her eyes shining with gratitude and affection. At that moment, they both knew they were moving in the right direction. The following months were filled with a mix of expectations and anxiety. Every completed stage of the process was another step closer to officially becoming a family. Yet, even amidst the waiting and uncertainty, life continued at Albert's house. Laura was doing well in school, making new friends, and exploring her interests. She was beginning to thrive, and Albert found himself growing more comfortable in his role as a father. He discovered a side of himself he hadn't known existed, an immense capacity for love, patience, and understanding. Their evenings were filled with warmth and laughter. Bedtime stories became a cherished routine, as did the laughter-filled dinners and deep conversations about Laura's dreams and fears. The two of them had built a life together, one filled with moments of joy, connection, and hope for the future. One late afternoon, after another round of interviews, they returned home feeling tired but hopeful. Albert sat down on the sofa, and Laura curled up beside him. He looked down at the young girl, who now occupied such a large space in his heart, and he felt a rush of emotion. He had always believed that his life was complete with his work and his accomplishments, but Laura had shown him that there was so much more to life than he had ever imagined. "We're almost there," Laura Albert said softly, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "I know this process is hard, but we're doing this together, and that's what matters." Laura leaned her head against Albert's shoulder, feeling a deep sense of safety and love. "I know, Albert," she whispered, her voice full of warmth, "and I'm so happy about that." And so, day by day, step by step, the bond between Albert and Laura grew stronger. The adoption process was arduous and filled with challenges and uncertainties, but each hurdle they overcame only strengthened their connection. They were no longer just a man and a girl trying to rebuild their lives, they were becoming a true family. A family built not just on shared experiences, but on love, trust, and the hope of a brighter future together. The day of the final hearing arrived more quickly than either Laura or Albert had anticipated. That morning, a blend of nerves and optimism filled the air as they prepared for what would be one of the most important days of their lives. Seated side by side in the quiet courtroom, the two of them waited for the judge to arrive, their futures hanging in the balance. Albert held Laura's hand tightly, his grip both reassuring and steady, offering her a sense of comfort and security. When the judge, a middle-aged man with a kind expression and gentle demeanor, entered the room, a hush fell over everyone present. He took his seat and began to review the documents before him. The seconds felt like hours as he flipped through the pages, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Then, after a few moments of silence, the judge looked up, his gaze falling on Albert and Laura. "Mr. Morgan," Laura, the judge began, his voice calm and authoritative, yet warm. "I have carefully reviewed all the material related to your case. It is evident that you have formed a strong and loving bond, one that embodies the essence of family." He paused, allowing a slight smile to touch his lips. "I am pleased to announce that the adoption is officially approved. Congratulations, you are now, in the eyes of the law, father and daughter." For a moment, Laura couldn't quite believe what she had just heard. It seemed almost too good to be true. But then, as the realization sank in, tears of joy began to well up in her eyes. She turned to Albert, throwing her arms around him in a tight embrace, her emotions spilling over. Albert hugged her back just as fiercely, tears glistening in his own eyes as he held his new daughter close. "We are a family now," Laura Albert said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, we are," Laura replied, her smile radiant, lighting up her entire face. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly secure, like she had finally found the place where she belonged. With the adoption now official, A new chapter began in Laura's life. She started attending a nearby school with excellent facilities, dedicated teachers, and an environment where she could truly thrive. On her first day, Laura was a bundle of nerves and excitement. But as they stood at the school gate, Albert offered her the same encouragement and support that had carried her through so much already. "You'll do great, Laura," he said with a smile. "Just be yourself and show everyone what you're capable of." Laura nodded, taking a deep breath. She felt confident knowing that Albert believed in her, and with that, she stepped through the school's gates, ready to embrace the new opportunities ahead of her. The first few weeks were challenging, as they often are with any big change, but Laura quickly found her stride. Her intelligence and dedication didn't go unnoticed by her teachers, who were impressed by her eagerness to learn and her drive to succeed. Laura soon became involved in various extracurricular activities, from joining the reading club to competing with the math team. Her days were filled with learning and discovery, and with each new achievement, her confidence grew. One evening, as Laura sat at the kitchen table working on her homework, Albert joined her, taking a seat beside her. He watched her for a moment, a smile tugging at his lips before he spoke. "I'm so proud of you, Laura," he said warmly. "You've been working so hard and showing incredible talent. I want you to know that I'll always do everything I can to make sure you have a bright future." Laura looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the gratitude she felt deep within her heart. "Thank you, Albert," she said softly. "You've given me the chance for a better life, and I promise I won't waste it." Albert reached out and gently stroked her hair, a deep sense of satisfaction filling him. They had come so far together, and he couldn't have been more proud of the young woman Laura was becoming. As the months passed, Laura's life continued to blossom. She participated in school competitions, winning awards and gaining recognition among her peers. Her name became synonymous with excellence, and she became a positive role model within the school community. Through it all, Albert was by her side, always present, always encouraging. He made sure that Laura had every opportunity to grow, to explore her talents, and to reach for her dreams. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, and together they built a life filled with love, laughter, and hope for the future. And so what had once seemed like an uncertain and challenging journey had blossomed into something truly beautiful. Laura and Albert were no longer just two individuals trying to navigate life's difficulties. They were a family, bound by love, trust, and the unshakable belief that together they could face anything. Albert's once quiet and spacious house had transformed into a home filled with life, laughter, and the warmth of family. The once empty rooms now echoed with shared memories as he and Laura spent weekends exploring museums, parks, and libraries, always on the lookout for new ways to learn, have fun, and bond together. Every day, Albert was reminded of the promise he had made to Laura to give her a bright future. It wasn't just a statement, but a commitment he lived by every day. And so, with love, dedication, and a renewed sense of confidence in what lay ahead, Albert and Laura continued walking together, building a life full of hope and endless possibilities. Time seemed to fly by, and before they knew it, Laura had turned 17. Adolescence brought with it a new set of challenges, both for Laura and for Albert. The school was still a place where Laura excelled academically, but the pressures of growing up began to intensify. Social dynamics shifted, and friendships became more complicated, with groups forming and dissolving just as quickly. Laura felt the weight of trying to fit in, of wanting to be accepted by her peers, and at times she found herself torn between staying true to her values and trying to blend in with those around her. The academic demands only grew, with more projects, tasks, and higher expectations bearing down on her. And amidst all of this, Laura couldn't shake the questions that had begun to surface more frequently in her mind, questions about her origins, about her mother, Lucy, and her father. These questions lingered in her thoughts, sometimes silent, sometimes overwhelming, creating a deep sense of longing and curiosity in her heart. She missed her mother terribly and found herself wondering more and more about the father she barely remembered. One evening, after a tough day at school, Laura found herself sitting alone on the porch, gazing up at the stars. The night sky stretched endlessly above her, a canvas of twinkling lights that offered some comfort but no answers to the questions swirling in her mind. She felt a heavy weight in her chest, a sadness she couldn't quite put into words. Albert, noticing her distress, quietly joined her on the porch, sitting down beside her and placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay, Laura?" he asked softly, his voice full of concern and care. Laura sighed deeply, her gaze still fixed on the sky. "I'm just thinking about a lot of things, Albert," she admitted, her voice carrying a hint of sadness. "Sometimes I miss my mom so much. I know she struggled, but she loved me, and I miss that connection. And I wonder about my dad. I know almost nothing about him. When he died, I was so young, and Mom never talked much about him. When she did, she'd start crying. So I stopped asking. But now, I wish I knew more." Albert listened intently, his heart aching for Laura as she opened up about the feelings she had been carrying. He had always known that her past would resurface at some point, and he had prepared himself for the day when Laura would start asking these kinds of questions. He had hoped to protect her from the pain of those memories, but he knew that she deserved answers, no matter how difficult they might be. "I'm so sorry you're feeling this way," Laura Albert said gently, his voice filled with empathy. "I know it must be hard not knowing more about your father, and missing your mom is completely natural. You've been through so much, and I can't imagine how difficult it must be to carry those memories with you. But I want you to know that I'm here for you, always. We can talk about anything. Whenever you're ready." Laura nodded, feeling the comfort of his words but still grappling with the emotions inside her. "I know, Albert," she replied quietly. "It's just, I wish I could remember him better. I wish I knew what he was like, or had more stories to hold on to. And with Mom, I feel like there are so many things I never got to ask her, so many things I'll never know." Albert squeezed her shoulder gently, his heart heavy with the weight of what she was going through. "You've got a lot of questions, and it's okay to feel that way," he said softly. "We can try to find some answers together if that's what you want. But no matter what, you're not alone in this. You have me, and you have the family we've built together. We'll face whatever comes, side by side." Laura looked at Albert, her eyes brimming with gratitude. She knew that he was right, she wasn't alone, and she didn't have to carry the burden of her past by herself. She had a new family, one that loved and supported her, and that made all the difference. Even though the pain of the past would never fully go away, she knew she had a future filled with love and possibility. "Thank you, Albert," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Albert smiled, his heart swelling with pride and love. "You'll never have to find out," he replied warmly. "We're in this together always." And with that, they sat together in the quiet of the night, finding comfort in each other's presence, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Albert took a deep breath, knowing that the conversation they were having was both important and delicate. He had always anticipated that one day Laura would have questions about her past, about her mother and father, but that didn't make facing the moment any easier. He wanted to choose his words carefully, to honor her feelings while also offering her the reassurance and love she needed. "I understand, Laura," he began gently. "It's completely natural to miss your mother and to have questions about her and your father. Your mother, Lucy, was a strong woman. She faced so many challenges, but despite everything, I'm certain she loved you with all her heart. She did the best she could to take care of you. Even when life made it so difficult, I believe that deeply, even though I never had the chance to meet her." Laura looked at him, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Thank you, Albert," she said softly. I think I needed to hear that. She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her in a tight embrace, wanting to convey all the support and love he felt for her. "I will always be here for you," Laura Albert whispered, his voice full of conviction. "For any questions you have, for any difficult moments you face, you are my daughter, and I love you very much." Laura nestled into Albert's embrace, feeling the safety and love that his presence always provided. "I love you too, Albert, very much." The challenges of adolescence didn't magically disappear after that conversation, but something shifted within Laura. Knowing she could talk openly about her past, about her questions and uncertainties, made her feel stronger and more secure in who she was. She realized that no matter what difficulties arose, she had someone in her corner, someone who would listen, support her, and love her unconditionally. Albert, for his part, remained committed to being the rock she could always rely on, helping her navigate the complexities of growing up while facing his insecurities as a parent. The bond between them, built on trust and love, only grew stronger with each passing day. At 17, Laura made a decision that would shape the course of her future. Inspired by Albert's example of integrity, dedication, and commitment to justice, she decided that she wanted to follow in his footsteps and study law. She had seen firsthand the impact that one person could have on the lives of others, and she wanted to be that person for others, especially for those who, like her, had faced immense difficulties in life. She wanted to make a difference, to be a voice for those who had none, and to fight for the rights of the vulnerable and overlooked. When she shared her decision with Albert, his heart swelled with pride. He knew that this path wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that Laura had the strength, determination, and passion to succeed. As they sat together, discussing her plans, Albert couldn't help but marvel at how far she had come from a scared little girl on the streets to a confident young woman with dreams of making the world a better place. "You'll be an incredible lawyer," Laura Albert said, his voice filled with admiration. "I do not doubt that. You've already shown so much resilience, empathy, and intelligence. The world needs more people like you, people who care, who want to make a difference." Laura smiled, her eyes shining with both excitement and gratitude. "Thank you, Albert. I wouldn't be here without you. You've shown me what it means to stand up for what's right, and I want to do the same for others." Albert reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I'm so proud of you, Laura, and I'll be here every step of the way, supporting you in whatever you choose to do." And so, as Laura prepared to embark on this new chapter of her life, she did so with confidence, knowing that she had the unwavering support of Albert and the strength of the experiences that had shaped her. Together, they looked toward the future with hope and determination, ready to continue building a life full of love, purpose, and possibilities. As we wrap up this insightful journey, we hope you've gained valuable lessons and reflections from the stories and teachings shared. What has resonated with you the most? We invite you to share one key takeaway that you'll put into practice in your own life in the comments below. We'd love to hear how these ideas are impacting you. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue bringing meaningful content to you. Thank you for being a part of our community.